I spoke at a public school in Pennsylvania one time, and a kid sat on the second row. He said, Mr. Hovind, I'm an atheist. I said, really?
Well, here we go.
I said, you don't believe there's a God? He said, oh, there's no God. I said, well, son, let me ask you a question. This kid's a senior in high school. I said, do you know everything? He said, oh, no.
Oh my God, this is the stupid, this is a stupid Josh Feuerstein, challenge or whatever. This is a thing that got Jimmy Snow famous, actually. It was the $10,000 challenge.
What's up, Josh Feuerstein here. So I'm here to issue the $100,000 atheist challenge to anybody that could provide me proof or evidence that God does not exist. I think
that's proving a negative. It's literally impossible. It's a black swan fallacy.
It's rather ridiculous that there's been people for a long time that have said that God does not exist, and yet they're unarmed because they have zero evidence and zero proof. How would that ever hold up in a court of law? You see, if we were to look at absolute truth, and we were to look at the totality of all knowledge, all scientific facts, everything, and we were to be able to draw a circle that would represent it, it would look something like this, broad and expansive and large. And yet it is that if you were to draw a circle of everything that you know, every experience, every scientific fact that you've ever learned, whether in school or study, would probably look something more like this. Don't you think it's ironic that there's people that have lived in this little circle their entire life that are trying to claim that there's no God that exists outside of their knowledge? Therefore, because they've never experienced him, he doesn't exist.
Well, that's how logic works. Until you have evidence to believe something, there's no good justification to believe it. Logic 101. And there is currently zero evidence that the Christian God of the Bible who, made Jesus walk on water and who turned water into wine and performed all these miracles, resurrections and everything, zero evidence that that specific God exists. You can claim that a God might have created us, and it's more defensible as a position than the Christian God of the Bible. That one is completely indefensible. But you can't claim that you know or even are reasonably confident that a God exists. You can't claim that because there's no evidence of it whatsoever. Zero. Anyway, he's using a fallacy here. And that it sounds like that's what Kent Hovind is about to do as well.
I said, do you know maybe half of everything? He said, no. I said, well, let's just pretend for a few minutes that you know half of everything. I said, is it possible that God exists in the other half you don't know?
Sure, that's possible. And when I get literally any evidence, a shred, literally anything, I might change my mind. But there's nothing. There's no reason. In fact, there are negative reasons to think that the God of the Bible, of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all that, is real. Until I get that, the answer is it's nonsense. Especially like Kent Hovind's very specific subcategory of God, the one that comes along and makes a flood and people were living to 900 years old and all that shit. No.
Brand new thought bounced around in his brain for a while and got lost, I'm sure. I said, let me ask you a question, son. If you're an atheist, how do you tell right from wrong? He said, that's easy. I decide what's right and wrong. He said, I'm the God of my own universe.
I bet. Yeah, totally. I believe you without question. That's definitely something an atheist would say.
I said, well, I'm glad to hear about that because I'm going to shoot you in 5 minutes. He said, you can't do that. I said, oh, yeah, I can. You see, I'm the God of my own universe, and I decided it's fine for me to shoot you.
See, the problem is it's literally impossible to get your morals from the Bible. It is literally impossible because every moral precept it lays down is reversed a chapter later. You don't get your morals from the Bible. Nobody gets their morals from the Bible. You have a set of moral beliefs that exist in your mind already, and you retroactively go back into the Bible and look for verses that support those already existing beliefs. That is how Christian morality has always worked. That is the only way that Christian morality can work.
How do you decide right from wrong? I've asked this question to evolutionists all over the world. I've never gotten one to answer it.
I'll answer it. Our morality comes from the culture around us and the philosophy that exists as a result of our society. Here's how my morality goes. Bodily autonomy comes above all else, and then utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is a belief that you should do whatever you can to make society better. Whatever is good for the group is the moral thing to do. But bodily autonomy comes first. Here's an example. There's the old trolley problem, famously, where there's a train coming down the tracks, a trolley, and you are next to a switch, and if you don't flip the switch, 5 people are going to die. They're going to be hit by the trolley. If you do flip the switch, 1 person is going to die on the other tracks down the line. Everybody says the moral thing to do is to flip the switch to kill the 1 rather than the 5, right? Because that's utilitarianism. That's what's best for society. 5 lives are worth more than 1 life. But you can alter that scenario a little bit to get different results from different people. In the psychology literature, there's another example. Say you're standing on a bridge over the tracks, and there are 5 people down the line that are going to be hit by the trolley. You're standing next to a very fat man. Again, I didn't come up with this. This is just in the literature. Standing next to a very fat man. If you push this fat man off of the bridge, he will land on the trolley and stop it, thus killing 1 person, saving 5 lives, right? Nobody wants to be that fat man. You are more directly removing somebody's bodily autonomy. Before, you were making a simple moral decision, utilitarianism. In this case, you're directly removing somebody's personal choice by pushing them off the bridge. Here's another one. There are 5 people in a waiting room that all need a transplant of some sort. 1 needs a lung transplant, 1 needs a liver transplant, 1 needs a kidney, pancreas, whatever. And you are number 6, and you are healthy. You're just there for a regular routine checkup. Utilitarianism says the right thing to do is to kill the 1 healthy person and give his organs to the 5 unhealthy people, thus saving 5 lives and sacrificing 1 life. But that's a direct removal of bodily autonomy. That is you losing your ability to make choices for your own life, for yourself. In that example, bodily autonomy wins out. Bodily autonomy comes out on top. And that's why I value bodily autonomy and then utilitarianism. That's where I get my morality, and it's largely based on the culture in which I grew up, the values that I was raised to appreciate, the society that we all live in, that kind of thing. Like I said, it's literally impossible to get your morals from the Bible because every moral precept that it lays down is reversed a chapter later. You also get your morals from society around you. You're just getting your morals from weird little nutcases that hate people for no fucking reason, like gay people, for example.
Simple question. If evolution is true, how do you tell right from wrong? How do we tell right from wrong? Is there a big cosmic standard someplace, a thus saith the Lord?
No, there isn't. The Old Testament lays out a different set of morals than the New Testament. You literally cannot get your morals from the Bible. It is not possible to do.
If there isn't, we're in trouble. There was a Russian atheist astronomer came to America and he said, folks, either there is a God or there isn't. I thought, now this guy's really smart, And then he said, both possibilities are frightening. I thought, wow, that's a thought. If there's a God, we better find out who he is and find out what he wants and do what he says. Because he owns this place.
No.
If there is no God, we are in trouble. We're hurtling through space at 66,000 miles an hour and nobody's in charge.
No, I mean, our governments are in charge. And yeah, some really disturbing shit happens from our governments often. And that, yeah, I don't like that either. But we're here functioning effectively completely independently of a God. The world looks identical to what it would look like if there was no God. And we're functioning, we're surviving as a species, we're working, we're doing our thing. as though there were no God. And now you can believe in one if you want, but you don't have any reason to believe in one. There's no metaphysical miracle that happens like every Sunday at 3 p.m. that we can, like, every day or every Sunday at 2 p.m., every time somebody makes a piece of toast at that exact moment, the Mother Mary appears on every single piece of toast. That doesn't happen. There's no circumstance like that. There's no situation that unquestionably verifies the existence of your personal, specific God. We all just go about living our lives and doing our thing, and it looks exactly the way it would as if there were no God. Animals have their own morality too, which is based off their own empathy, which is what's best for the species, just like us. Right. And that's another thing I want to mention. Thanks for mentioning that. Empathy is the basis for utilitarianism, for my position that what's best for other people is best overall. We weren't always capable of putting ourselves in other people's shoes. There was a period of time, an evolutionary step that we took one day where people could suddenly start building models in their heads. I'm talking just regular old models, like we were hunting a mammoth. Mammoths are gigantic, not something you can take down alone, right? Early humans evolved the ability to build models in their heads. I'm going to rush down this pass here with a spear, poking this mammoth in the ass along the way to kind of prodding it or whatever. And you stand at the other end of the pass with a big butterfly net to catch it. They could build models in their heads. That was a novel moment in human history when we gained the ability to do that. And now that we can build models in our heads, we can put ourselves in other people's positions and understand what it's like. I don't want to be that guy that walks into a waiting room and might be cannibalized for, to save 5 lives. I don't want to be that person, so I'm not going to put other people in that position either. Empathy, the basis for modern morality. That's where we get our morality, from empathy, from utilitarianism, from our ability to care about the well-being of others, and to care about bodily autonomy over all else. That is the basis of our moral system in the United States, whether you realize that or not. And a lot of people violate that on a daily basis, and it leads to complete nonsense. Like the argument about how abortion is bad is a complete violation of bodily autonomy, and any other situation analogous to that, nobody would ever accept. You have the right to make choices for your own life, period. That's the bottom line. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Imagine you're in your home and somebody keeps breaking into your house at night and stealing half your food. Are you within your rights to just lock your door at night to prevent that from happening? Even if that person is going to die if you do it. Yes, bodily autonomy. You have the right to make decisions for your own life, your own possessions, your own everything. That is a perfectly analogous situation to abortion. There's somebody that is taking your resources in your body, and all you have to do is cut off the supply of resources. And there's nothing immoral about that. Bodily autonomy. What if you signed up for a transplant list when you were 18, say 20 years ago, at 18 years old, for example. But now you've decided that you're going to give your kidney to your sister who needs it. When you go to arrange this whole thing to do the kidney transplant for your sister, the government comes in and says, you're not allowed to do that. You promised your kidney to us, and we have a different person who wants the kidney. So now you have to go through with this whole process to give it to somebody else, and your sister just has to hit the list like everybody else. Bodily autonomy comes above all else in every situation. That is also analogous to abortion. You control your body, what happens to it, who uses the resources, when and why. Any other situation, people would understand the value and importance of bodily autonomy, but it's this very one specific thing that people refuse to accept because of propaganda from people like Kent Hovind. So, I reiterate, my morality comes from the society around me and it's based on bodily autonomy first and utilitarianism second, and every single person holds this exact same view in the United States. They just have it warped and distorted by propagandistic shitheads on a regular basis.
Scary thought. Evolution is the foundation for humanism. Man becomes God.
Nobody believes that.
I'm God.
Oh my God, it's a picture of Hitler. Here we go. Again, I know so much about this subject. I've been hoping to reach the Hitler subject.
I'm God. I'm God. I'm God. I'm God. I'm God. Hey, Gabriel, come and listen to this. Ha, ha, ha. One guy said, I will not accept creation philosophically because I do not want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible.
You don't choose to believe in God or to reject God. Let me rephrase. You don't choose to reject God. It's a conclusion that people reach. It's not a choice that they make. I can't choose to believe in God any more than I can choose to not believe, or any more than I can choose to believe that I have a 3-egg omelet on the table in front of me. I just don't. I can't suddenly change my mind and choose to believe that I do. That's not how society works. That's not how our minds work. It's not how reality works. I just don't believe it. And if you want me to, give me some evidence, literally anything.
Rifkin said, we no longer feel ourselves to be guests in someone else's home and therefore obliged to make our behavior conform to a set of pre-existing cosmic rules. It's our creation now. We make the rules.
All right, well, let's see. He also popped up another quote, 2049. Let me just check this one. We'll check both quotes to see if they're real. Hold on. Okay, let's see. Quote number 1, George Wald. That was this one here. Yes, Nobel Prize winner. This is one of the most infamous fake quotes in creationist circles. Here's the truth. The quote does not exist in any of George Wald's actual writings. It's fake. The citation given, Innovation and Biology, Scientific American, Volume 199, September 1958, page 100, is wrong. There's no article like that. His actual article was The Origin of Life in Scientific American, August 1954. Wald explained that spontaneous generation under modern conditions was disproved by Pasteur, but that scientists must investigate how life arose under different conditions in the distant past. He wrote, I think a scientist has no choice but to approach the origin of life through a hypothesis of spontaneous generation. Here's quote number, he never said he refused to believe in God or chose to believe the impossible. That's completely fabricated. The Talk Origins analysis concludes the quote reflects neither the words or the spirit of what Dr. Wald wrote. And here's quote number 2. The quote is real but deliberately cut off to distort its meaning. If you notice, there's like a comma here. And because we do, comma, where's the rest? The full quote ends, we are responsible to nothing outside of ourselves, for we are the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. The last line, for we're the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever, is a direct parody of the Christian Lord's Prayer ending. Rifkin was writing about biotechnology and genetic engineering, describing a worldview he was analyzing and critiquing, not necessarily endorsing as his personal philosophy. The book Algeny is complex and philosophical, examining the implications of humanity's ability to manipulate genetics. By cutting the quote where Hovind did, he removes the obviously ironic/parody religious reference that signals this is more of a commentary than a confession. So once again, Kent Hovind is lying, fabricating information that is not real with the intent to convince an audience of his position instead of just telling the truth. I really wish this dude didn't lie so brazenly and constantly. It's wild. If you have to lie this much to convince people of something, it's not worth believing.
Is home and therefore obliged to make our behavior conform to a set of pre-existing cosmic rules. It's our creation now. We make the rules. We establish the parameters of reality. We create the world, and because we do, we no longer feel ourselves beholden to outside forces. We no longer have to justify our behavior for now.
Oh, he finished the quote. Never mind. I didn't realize he finished it. This was not a serious statement. It was a parody. That's the point. It was a parody.
We are now the architects of the universe. We are responsible to nothing outside of ourselves. So we are the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. That's humanism. And evolution is the foundation for this pagan, idiotic philosophy.
It's not a philosophy. It is an understanding of how the world works, plain and simple.
Lewontin said, we take the side of science in spite of its patent absurdity of some of its constructs. We have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism.
All right, let's check on this quote.
Materialism is an absolute. We cannot allow a divine foot in the door. We cannot even think about the idea there might be a creator. Satan's put it in the minds of his followers that they ought to build a kingdom.
Okay, so far this seems to be the most legitimate quote that he's laid down, but it's being used in a deeply misleading way, obviously. The context is, this is written in a book review of Carl Sagan's The Demon-Haunted World. Great book, by the way. Lewontin was making a philosophical point about the methodological assumptions of science, not confessing to some conspiracy to suppress evidence for God. He was arguing, he was being deliberately provocative. The entire essay's a complex, nuanced critique of how science communicates with the public and the philosophical foundations of scientific methodology. He's describing methodological naturalism. Science, by definition, only investigates natural causes. This isn't a conspiracy. It's the fundamental method that makes science work. You can't do chemistry by saying God did it as an explanation for a reaction. And he's critiquing science popularizers. Lewontin was actually criticizing people like Carl Sagan for being too simplistic and triumphalist about science, acknowledging that science has limitations and makes unfulfilled promises. There you go.
A divine foot in the door.
And about that one, this refers to the methodological naturalism, not philosophical atheism. Science investigates natural causes. The moment you allow God did it as a scientific explanation, you've ended scientific investigation. It doesn't mean scientists can't personally believe in God, obviously.
We cannot even think about the idea there might be a creator. Satan's put it in the minds of his followers that they ought to build a kingdom and rule the world. Once you reject God, then a bunch of people get together and say, wow, we gotta control this planet. We gotta rule the world. What?
I mean, we need a government, right? Don't we need to have a government in the world? And if we don't, then everything's gonna fall apart? I'm sorry, like, I know that you're a sovereign citizen nutcase that refuses to pay taxes and went to federal prison for 10 fucking years for it, but everybody has to contribute to society if we want to live in a society. That's just how it works. Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that, and maybe you should consider that for other creators too.
The thing we have to do is start to kill some of the other people. There's too many of them here. See, if evolution is true,
Literally nobody argued that.
who owns the world?
Your mother.
Who makes the rules? How do we decide right from wrong? If man is God, and that's what humanism means, there is no absolute standard. How do you tell?
That's just not true. The absolute standard is created in the society in which you live. For example, Muslim countries have their own kind of set of moral precepts and values and stuff. They value modesty in women way more than people in the United States value modesty in women. In the United States, we all value bodily autonomy and then utilitarianism. And you're trying to warp it out of proportion so that people, stop valuing those things in society?
How do we decide right from wrong? If man is God, and that's what humanism means, there is no absolute standard. How do you tell right from wrong? I mean, maybe Osama bin Laden should decide right from wrong for everybody.
Again, nobody should be deciding right and wrong for everybody. They should be leaving everybody alone and holds the moral precept, your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. You can swing it anywhere you want except for right here. That's the basis of modern American morality. Your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. And that's the way I like it.
Maybe Congress ought to decide. Maybe Bill Clinton ought to decide.
Nobody decides. Leave me alone, I'll leave you alone.
Right and wrong. Well, never heard of that before. How do you tell right from wrong? Where's the rules? Look, folks, during the Civil War, one guy decided he did not want to get involved. So, he put on a Yankee coat and rebel pants.
Genius. Good thinking. That's definitely going to protect you from both sides, right?
After the battle, he was found dead. His Yankee coat full of rebel bullet holes and his rebel pants full of Yankee bullet holes. You might as well get on one side or the other, okay? Just make a decision. We're in the middle of a battle, the biggest battle on the planet. We are in the middle of it. Mankind is the battlefield.
You can mind your own fucking business and it doesn't hurt you one single bit. You can leave people alone if they're gay. They can be gay and it doesn't affect you in any way, shape, or form. That's okay to be gay. And if you don't like that, then go away. Leave everybody else alone. You can be a hateful little shithead on your own time in your own little place and nobody gives a fuck. Kent Hovind is not going to accept people minding their own fucking business. He's going to impose his personal views on everybody around him and pretend to be a victim if they don't accept those views that he holds. He is the world's biggest fucking victim on planet Earth. You know, that's one thing that I have learned about people through debate. I've been doing a lot of debates lately. One thing I've learned is that people, televangelists, people like that, are the biggest victims on planet fucking Earth. They cannot help themselves but to cry about how victimized they are. Oh, they're so mistreated, these poor people. It's fucking insufferable, dude.
Between Satan and God. There's a great book by Henry Morris called The Long War Against God. I highly recommend that one. It's so simple. You decide which side you want to be on, and then you help your general win. So Christians, though, have a great advantage. See, we have an infallible book that tells us how it comes out. I read the last chapter. We win. I think it'd be smart to get on God's side, okay? Evolution is a dangerous philosophy because it's the foundation for racism.
Nope, it's not actually. Racism existed before evolution was kind of formed out as a complete idea. Yeah, Carl Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, was a botanist who created our modern system of biological classification. He was not an evolutionist, as evolution didn't come along until way down the line. You know, Darwin, when did Darwin... Yeah, 1859 is when Darwin wrote The Origin of Species. And this guy was around in 1730, doing his work in 1730. So we're talking 130 years before evolution was recognized as a legitimate understanding of the world. Racism didn't exist until Carl Linnaeus came along and created his whole thing. There was ethnocentrism. There was the belief that people of certain tribes are inferior or superior in one way or another. But racism, like actual race ideology, didn't exist until the 1730s, basically, from Carl Linnaeus. And that was the basis on which eugenics was built and racial ideology. Racial hate. I mean, race isn't real anyway. Race is fake. Ethnicity is real. Race is not. We are all one race. Black people, I share more in common genetically with a black person than I do a white person. Like, interracial genetic markers are more similar than intra-racial genetic markers. I'm trying to say people between races have more in common with each other than people within the races. So here's a little bit about Linnaeus. In his groundbreaking Systema Naturae, I think, 1735, Linnaeus classified humans into 4 varieties based on continent. Europeus, Americanus, Asiaticus, and Africanus. Importantly, Linnaeus never actually used the word race. He called them varieties. Homo variat, man varies. The original classifications in 1735, Europeans were whitish, Americans were reddish, Asians were tawny or dark. I hope that isn't a slur. I've never heard that word before. And Africans were blackish. Here's where it got worse, 1758 to 1766. In later editions, Linnaeus added behavioral and moral characteristics to physical traits. Europeans became sanguine, Americans choleric, Asians melancholic, and Africans phlegmatic, okay, along with descriptions of clothing, governance, and temperament. By the 10th edition, 1758, the descriptions included Americans as stubborn, zealous, free, Europeans as gentle, acute, inventive, Asians as austere, haughty, and greedy, and Africans with various negative stereotypes. The fact is, our temperament as humans doesn't vary that much between different races or different continents or whatever. You have dogs who have very different temperaments and personalities based on where they are or what kind of breed they are or whatever. That's true. That exists for dogs. But in humans, temperament and strength and stuff are polygenic, which means we have a lot of kind of different, a lot of genes have to change for us to get different temperaments, or for us to breed different temperaments into people. It isn't just like you select for like one thing the way that you would with a dog. You can't do that with humans. It would take literally thousands of years of direct, specific, intentional breeding of humans. And if there's one thing we know, you can't keep humans from sleeping with each other. It doesn't work. And that would be a necessary component of breeding certain traits into humans. We're just too complex for that. Anyway, that was the basis of eugenics. And eugenics was a massive social movement that was completely independent of evolution. In the early 1900s, it was very, very popular. Had nothing to do with evolution, actually. Completely unrelated. People who deeply believed in eugenics to the bottom of their black little hearts found justifications for it, such as evolution. They'd look anywhere they could for it. But evolution had really very little to do with the basis of it. That being said, Linnaeus did not invent racism. It already existed to some degree slightly before. But racism is an ideology. I mean, racial ideology, race realism, was an ideology that came about fairly recently in the grand scheme of things. Richard Bradley published classifications of 5 sorts of men in 1721 before Linnaeus. Religious justifications for slavery were common around that time. Atlantic slave trade was well underway. It started in the 1500s, and people came up with all kinds of religious justifications for their slave ownership, basically. Bottom line is that evolution had nothing to do with eugenics, aside from being used as a justification for an already existing ideology. Had nothing to do with Nazism. That was fully based on eugenics. And it had nothing, and it was not created by Darwin, racism or whatever.
The idea that one race of people is superior to another comes from evolution.
No, it doesn't. It came about long before evolution. I can't believe he's even saying this. Like, 1 second of critical thought just shoots this to pieces.
Here's Darwin's book, The Origin of Species. That's not the whole title. And by the way, the theory was popular way before Darwin. Okay, he made it more popular, but it was Aristotle taught a form of evolution.
No. Evolution, as we understand it today, it did come about before Darwin, but yes, he did popularize it. I'm just looking this one up about Aristotle. No, that's completely false. He did not teach about evolution or anything even approximating it, in any modern sense, certainly. This is another common creationist distortion. It's just trash. Complete trash.
400 BC. The Egyptians taught evolution to Moses when he was in school. They said life evolved from the slime on the Nile River. Moses learned that growing up. Later, edited the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Didn't faze him, okay? The textbooks will show you that there are different species of animals. Origin of species. Now, wait a minute. There might be a different species, but they're the same kind of animal, quite obviously.
Okay, kind is not a distinction. It's not a real distinction. And if you push these people on this and try to get a little more info from them on this, people like Hovind will admit that when they say kind, what they mean is species. When you push him and ask him more direct questions, what do you mean when you say kind? He'll say, an animal that can bring forth, an animal that can mate with one and produce offspring. That's a species, obviously. So he's completely full of shit. Completely. Did I get a blood moon and just miss it? What happened here?
Now, this textbook gives a little more of the title. It says, that Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Oh, they're lying. They're not giving the whole title. I've got it right here in my hand. Here's the title of the book. The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life.
Race was a common word at the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that he was talking about that specifically. Again, race existed like long before Darwin. It didn't mean human races here. In Darwin's time and in biological contexts, races simply meant varieties or subspecies, like breeds of pigeons or varieties of plants. So Hovind is distorting and lying about this, of course. Anybody surprised?
Favored races? Now, Charlie, that's not politically correct.
Wait, are you in favor of things that aren't politically correct? I thought you were. What happened?
Oh, it was in 1859 when he wrote the book. We had slavery in America. Darwin thought natives were just advanced animals.
Again, like he is attributing all of these things to Darwin when it had nothing to do with Darwin. It existed long before him. Let me just verify this. Out of curiosity, I just looked it up. Did Darwin think black people were animals? No, this is a complete fabrication that creationists spread by misquoting Darwin. What he actually believed, which, I don't know why it matters anyway. Why do I care what Darwin believed? He's not like a god to me. He's just some dude that recognized an interesting pattern and put it down on paper, which then led to new scientific discoveries. That's it. So I really don't care what he believed. I don't have any reason to like or dislike the guy one way or another. But, since we're diving into this intellectual honesty, Darwin explicitly argued that all humans were one species. This was actually controversial at the time because many scientists believed in polygenism, separate origins for different races. In The Descent of Man, 1871, Darwin wrote that the differences between human races were superficial and didn't justify classification as separate species. Darwin was not racist, apparently. He was vocally anti-slavery. He witnessed slavery in South America during the Beagle Voyage and was disgusted by it. He argued against the idea that any human group was closer to apes than others. The misquote, creationists often cite a passage where Darwin discusses savages versus civilized people, but this reflected the Victorian cultural prejudices of his time, not his evolutionary theory. Many Christians of his era held identical views about savage races needing to be civilized through missionary work. Darwin was a man of his time with Victorian-era cultural biases, but his scientific work actually undermined racial hierarchies by showing common ancestry. And to directly address the claim that eugenics came from evolution, no, the relationship is more complex. Selective breeding of humans and animals predates Darwin by thousands of years. Plato discussed selective breeding of humans in the Republic, 375 BCE. The Bible discusses selective breeding of livestock, Genesis 30. Francis Galton, Darwin's cousin, coined the term eugenics in 1883. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yes, he was inspired by Darwin's work, but he misapplied it. Darwin himself was skeptical of Galton's ideas and never endorsed eugenics programs. Evolution is descriptive science, how nature works, and eugenics is prescriptive ideology, how humans should act. This is the naturalistic fallacy. Just because something happens in nature doesn't mean we should do it. Lions kill cubs. We don't use that to justify infanticide. There's a lot more to this, but I guess we'll just continue on from here with the video and see where it takes us.
Oh, it was in 1859 when he wrote the book. We had slavery in America. Darwin thought natives were just advanced animals.
Nope. That is a complete bald-faced lie. He did not believe that. He was disturbed by slavery, but he did hold Victorian-era cultural beliefs. It was just a product of his time.
Darwin said at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races. Darwin
Again, this is part of his Victorian era beliefs, I believe.
said, from the war of nature and famine and death, the most exalted object we're capable of conceiving, the production of higher animals, follows.
This is not about people. This was about literal just animals.
Higher animals. Well, see, that was popular to say in 1859. We had slavery in this country. You could buy and sell Negroes like cows. Henry Fairfield Osborn from the American Museum of Natural History said, the standard intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of the 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapien.
Wait, who? Henry Fairfield Osborn? Who the fuck is this and why do I care? New York. Give it a second. It's taking a gander. Yep, that one is real apparently. This is one of the few that is not fabricated. I'm not sure who the fuck this is, though. Museum of Natural History? The American Museum of Natural History? He's a curator? Okay.
Now, if a professor said that today, how long would he keep his job? Stephen Gould knew this was true. He said biological arguments for racism may have been common before 1850, but they increased by orders of magnitude following the acceptance of evolutionary theory.
I think it was eugenics that really inspired all of the hate, not evolution. Like creationists, young earth creationists like Kent Hovind have put a lot of time and effort into convincing people that evolution and eugenics are the same thing when they're not. When they're not even linked to each other. They didn't come about by the same people or the same year or anything. It's really important, seems to me at least, very important that we understand that they are not linked to each other. Like World War II, the hate about Jews and everything was not about evolution. It was about eugenics. They're different.
Theory. Huxley said, no rational man cognizant of the facts believes the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior of the white man. Kingsley, Anglican priest, said the black people of Australia, exactly the same race as the African Negro, cannot take in the gospel. They can't be saved. All attempts to bring them to a knowledge of the true God have as yet utterly failed. Poor brutes in human shape, they must perish off the face of the earth. Kingsley was the Anglican priest who went around promoting Darwin's book when it came out.
I have no idea if that's true, and I don't see why it matters at all. This is another argument like all racists and dictators have done this exact same action throughout history. All of them have done this exact thing. They all drank water. If you don't want to be a racist dictator, then don't drink water. That's the kind of argument you're laying down for us right now. It's absurd.
In 1860, Kingsley wrote a letter to his wife after he visited Ireland from the potato famine, where 1 million people died. He said, I am haunted by the human chimpanzees I saw along the 100 miles of horrible country. To see white chimpanzees is dreadful. If they were black, one would not feel it so much. But their skins, except where tanned by exposure, are as white as ours. Here's these Irish people starving from the potato famine. Kingsley drives by and looks at them and says, oh, these poor white chimpanzees. He thought they hadn't evolved as far.
Oh, give it a fucking rest, dude. He is really trying to shoehorn evolution into literally everything, isn't he? Even where it doesn't fit.
The Mormons teach Mormons in this life, or Negroes in this life, are denied the priesthood.
They don't teach that anymore, and they didn't teach that at the time when Kent Hovind posted this. I'm not here to defend Mormonism by any stretch of the imagination, but I want him to fairly represent everything and everybody, and this is a bastardization of what they believed at the time that this was created.
Negroes are not equal with other races. It's the Lord's doing. It's based on his law of spiritual laws of justice and grows out of the lack of spiritual valiance of those concerned in the first estate.
Again, that had nothing to do with evolution. I'm not sure why you're even bringing this up or what it has to do with literally anything. This was about them believing in the curse of Ham. I believe it was because Ham was Noah's son, and Noah gets pissed drunk one night, and Ham, his son, walks in on him to see his twig and berries hanging out. You know, the old apple bag. Just swinging to and fro, and God cursed him, or Noah cursed him in God's name or some other shit, because he saw the old twig and berries. I mean, kind of an ass backwards, reason to curse somebody if you ask me. But anyway, that's what the Bible says. The sign of the curse was black skin in the Bible. That's how you know that the descendants of Ham, that's how you recognize the descendants of Ham is through their black skin. I think that's like absolutely wild, right? And I think Mormonism held that belief about black people until the 1970s, maybe 1980, 79, 80, somewhere in there. There's even a book about how black people are not allowed to participate fully in the church. Like they weren't allowed to go to the temple or anything. They're allowed to be church members, but they cannot be full members because they're cursed or whatever. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like all the reasons and excuses people came up with to exclude people that just don't look like them. It's nuts. Anyway, the point is, why is Kent Hovind bringing this up? This has nothing to do with anything. How is this related to evolution at all?
See, the Mormons teach babies in heaven are born first. The Heavenly Father has thousands of wives and has spirit babies. If they're a good spirit baby, when they come to earth, they get a white-skinned body. If they're a bad spirit baby, they get a black-skinned body. That's what they teach.
They didn't teach this even when Kent Hovind made this. That was a lie. He was lying when he said that. But again, what does this have to do with evolution? Like, literally anything at all?
Mormon Doctrine by Bruce McConkie. He said, it's a divine decree. Cain, Ham, and the whole Negro race have been cursed with black skin, the mark of Cain.
Right. Actually, it's the mark of Ham, I believe. The mark of Cain is different, if I'm not mistaken. Mormons in the chat can correct me on that if you want, but...
Mormon Apostle Peterson said, if there's a drop of Negro blood in my children, as I've read to you, they receive the curse. Mormon President Brigham Young said, shall I tell you the law of God regard to the African race? If the white man who belongs to the chosen seed mixes his blood with the seed of Cain, under the penalty under the law of God is death on the spot. This will always be so. You should read some books about Mormonism and see what they've done in the last few hundred years over this teaching of racial superiority. See, racism was popular in the 1800s. I mean, they would buy the slaves and put them on ships and pack them in as tight as they could.
I mean, it was popular in the 1700s. Why did you pick the 1800s to start? Because that's when evolution started to get big. That's why. That's why he picked the 1800s. It's a disingenuous lie, an attempt to deceive people into believing something that is not true. Isn't lying of the devil? What happened to that? Satan is the father of all lies, and suddenly you're perfectly fine with flat out lying to people's fucking faces like this?
By the way, guys, check out my new shop, owenmorgan.com/shop. I have a bunch of really cool designs on there.
If a bunch died, oh well, save as many as you can. But they sold them on the market. Some people thought some leaders in America thought the Aborigines were not as evolved as the white man because the Aborigines have a bigger jaw. Their jaw bones are bigger. Eskimos in Alaska have the same thing. They have bigger jaw bones. And they said, well, that's because they've evolved. They're not as evolved from the apes as we are. No, it's because they use their jaws all the time like a vice. They don't carry a toolbox around with them. They wander around a lot, so they don't want to carry 50 pounds of tools. When they want to pull the skin off of something, they hold it in their teeth and pull the skin off. They use their teeth. They use their jaw muscles all the time. And any bodybuilder will tell you the more you use your muscles, the bigger your bones get. It actually develops the bones also. The mental life of savages rises little above that of higher mammals, especially the apes, with which they are genetically connected. The intelligence moves within the narrowest bounds, and one can no more or less speak of their reason than that of the more intelligent animals. These lower races, such as the Vedas or Australian Negroes, are psychologically nearer to the mammals, apes or dogs, than to civilized Europeans. We must therefore assign a totally different value to their lives.
Again, I'm not sure who he's quoting here. Who is this? Ernst Haeckel, The Wonders of Life? I'm not sure. Is this the same Haeckel who did drawings previously? I'm not sure. Either way, half the quotes he lays down are completely made up, fabricated out of the ether, so I hesitate to believe this one. But it doesn't matter. Yes, racist ideas existed 100 years ago. Of course, 150 years ago. Absolutely. Everyone agrees with that. What point are you trying to make here? He's trying to claim that it was evolution that was to blame for all racism and suffering in the world, when in reality, progressive thought, moving forward, the belief that you should accept people and appreciate and love people is a left-wing progressive position, left-wing progressive idea. And Christianity is a traditionalist right-wing idea. The church, every time society tries to move forward and accept others, there's the church standing in the way every single time. The church is the problem in this scenario. You want to discourage racism and hate? Talk to the church, not the scientists.
A totally different value to their lives. That's Ernst Haeckel, the guy that lied about the gill slits.
Yeah, so in a previous part, he talked about Haeckel and said that there was a big trial and a conspiracy of him. He claimed that he drew embryos of humans to disingenuously to look like embryos of fish to prove that we evolved from fish or whatever. Haeckel didn't draw the embryos to be disingenuous. He did embellish them a little bit, which he modified later to be a little bit more accurate to what they actually look like. But it wasn't, nope, you can't be up here right now, kitty. I'm sorry. You're such a good kitty, but there's no room up here. Go on, good kitty. God, both cats are in here trying to chill out with me. Haeckel eventually did modify his drawings to be a little bit more representative of reality. But Hovind lied, straight up lied, and claimed that there was a trial that there never was. There was just never a trial like that or anything. So, regarding this quote, Haeckel's views were shaped by German Romanticism and Christianity, not just evolution. Oh, interesting. I didn't know he was German. That makes sense. It's a German name. He was raised Lutheran and his kitty. I told you can't be up here right now. Such a good kitty, though. I'm sorry. I'll pet you. I will give you pets because you're a good kitty. And I give kitties lots of pats, not just pets, but pats. I think kitties love pats. She's a good kitty. Okay. Anyway, I can see you thinking about it, kitty. Don't do it. Do not do it. So it looks like he was, so he was involved in like what appears to be the right wing, like movement associated with like German kind of extremism, right wing eugenics extremism or whatever to some degree. It was like a religious / philosophical framework for him.
Value to their lives. That's Ernst Haeckel, the guy that lied about the gill slits. At the beginning of the white settlement, this is in Australia, there were an estimated 300,000 Aborigines all over Australia. Aborigines were viewed by the settlers as primitive, savage, unchanging. In addition to warfare killings, water, flour, and sugar were poisoned, and diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza were introduced intentionally to lower the population.
Again, don't believe a word out of his mouth, ever. He's a habitual liar, not just incorrect about some things, but intentionally sets out to deceive people by falsifying information regularly. That's like his whole bit. So be very skeptical of every word out of Kent Hovind's mouth, especially this. But it doesn't really matter anyway. Like, I don't understand what this has to do with anything.
It was the law. You could kill Aborigines if you wanted. How many saw the movie Quigley Down Under, where he was brought in to kill the Aborigines because he was a marksman?
Jesus, that's messed up. I've never heard of that before.
Every single Tasmanian Aborigine was killed. Why? I think the evolution theory is directly responsible for what happened to the slaughter of the Aborigines.
Okay, well, you can think whatever you want. It doesn't make it true.
These two people went to Australia to collect skulls for the museums in America. Here's the article right here. A New South Wales missionary was a horrified witness to the slaughter by mounted police of a group of dozens of Aboriginal men, women, and children. 45 heads were boiled down and the best 10 skulls packed off for overseas. They shot them just to get the bones.
Yeah, I don't understand. What does this have to do with evolution exactly?
Smithsonian has 33,000 sets of human remains in their basement. They call it the Army of the Potomac. These are used as evidence for evolution. Charles Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, started a movement called the eugenics movement to purify the human race. Let's get rid of some of these inferior races.
That's true, yep. It was Darwin's cousin, apparently, but it was not Darwin, and it wasn't based on evolution. It was based on racial theory, racial hygiene, the belief that races are different, which is not an evolutionary-based belief. It was a belief that existed long before evolution existed as a concept.
They drew in from all branches of science to make eugenics, to improve humanity. We could spend days talking about eugenics, but these ideas gave rise to American laws that empowered doctors to sterilize people they judged to be unfit.
That's true. Eugenics was the basis for, the Holocaust and all of the horrors that came from it. Again, not connected to evolution.
As a result, Black estimates that some 60,000 people were sterilized in the United States over the course of the 20th century.
It was a worldwide movement, eugenics was, horrifyingly. It wasn't just a German thing. Racial hygiene and all that other shit.
Some doctor thought, oh, they're not fit to be a mom or a dad. They sterilized them. This is in America.
Yep.
Most chilling, though, were the ways which American eugenics influenced their German counterparts. Hitler said, I have studied with great interest the laws of several American states concerning the prevention and reproduction by people whose progeny would, in all probability, be of no value or be injurious to the racial stock.
Yep. So I'll tell you what Kent Hovind is doing here. He's trying to tie racial ideology into evolution when they are not connected to each other. Racial ideology came about long before evolution.
In 1904, St. Louis had the World's Fair. They brought in 2,000 what they said were primitive people and had a big display about the primitive people.
Is this about the human zoos? Yeah, they had some human zoos in Japan, I believe.
To demonstrate the superiority of the white man. That's 100 years ago, folks. Oda Benga was put in a cage with chimpanzees. He was taken away from his wife and 2 kids. They put him in with the chimpanzees as part of the display so people come by and laugh at how primitive the pygmies were. He died. He committed suicide. Oda did.
Yep.
He's buried in Lynchburg, Virginia. Roosevelt thought the Indians were an inferior species because they hadn't evolved as far.
Yes, that's true. Roosevelt had some really horrifying, Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, not Franklin Delano Roosevelt, has some really horrifying, disturbing, evil quotes out there that are inexcusable and unforgivable.
Roosevelt said, I wish the wrong people could be prevented entirely from breeding. He thought the immigrants from Europe, Scotland, Ireland, and the Orient were a threat to American society.
Again, not sure what that has to do with evolution.
How many of you have ancestors from one of those places? Oh, you're inferior species, according to these guys, okay? In 1871, Congress scrapped all treaties with the Indians and moved them off to the reservation system they're still using today.
Well, they have reservations because their land was stolen, of course, but that's a good thing that they have their own spaces to live now. It was evil that we practiced manifest destiny and the Trail of Tears, the literal genocide on Native Americans. But Kent Hovind is portraying this as a problem of evolution. I don't understand. What the fuck are you even talking about right now? Again, I'm actually Native American. It's on my birth certificate. And it's a high enough percentage that I could join a tribe if I want. My grandmother she died recently, but my grandma was a member of a tribe. My mom is a registered member of the tribe, the Mohegan tribe. Not Mohican with a C, but Mohegan with a G. Mohegan, Mohegan. So, I feel this pretty acutely myself, but I don't know what this has to do with evolution or whatever. What's he talking about?
Cherokees, down where we're from in Florida in that area, were moved off to Oklahoma, or to Indiana. Yeah, Oklahoma, Indian Territory. 1/3 of them died along the forced journey, called the Trail of Tears.
Yep. Okay. What's that have to do with evolution?
Because our leaders thought they were an inferior species.
That's racial ideology, not evolution.
We could spend all day on that one. The Bible says we've all got one Father. No reason to be a racist. All God hath made of one blood all nations of men to dwell upon the earth. Darwin also said, a married man is a poor slave, worse than a Negro.
Okay, let's find out. Because half the quotes he puts in here, over half, are completely 100% fabricated. The Autobiography of Charles Darwin. Let's see if we can get some answers on this. Okay, it looks like this is... Here's the actual story behind this quote. What Darwin actually wrote. In his private autobiography, before marrying his cousin Emma Wedgwood in 1839, was he from Alabama? Darwin was making a pro-con list about whether to get married. He wrote, as a married man, he would be a poor slave worse than a Negro, but then continued, one cannot live the solitary life with groggy old age, friendliness, and cold and childless staring in one's face, concluding that there's many a happy slave. And also, be a poor slave worse than a Negro. Darwin believed that everybody was equal. He believed that the idea that there were higher men and lower men was false. He believed in equality, that there was one human race. Correctly. He was correct in saying there was one race, the human race. So Kent Hovind is just completely bastardizing and twisting this around. He's lying about this. This is not representative of anything.
I never met his wife, but if a guy said that, if a college professor said that today, how long would he keep his job?
Yeah, the word Negro was the preferred word at the time. That's how people referred to each other. It was not unusual. Now it sounds a little too close to the N-word, but it wasn't back then.
Or his life? Yeah. Darwin said the chief distinction in intellectual powers of the two sexes is shown by man's attaining to a higher eminence in whatever he takes up than can woman. Whether requiring deep thought, reason, or imagination, or merely the use of senses and hands, the average mental power in man must be above that of women.
Yeah, and here's the next part of the quote. It's not about women being inferior. It's about marriage limiting his freedom. Darwin was a young bachelor worried about losing his independence. He was using hyperbole to describe the loss of personal freedom that comes with marriage, not denigrating his future wife or women in general. He literally married Emma and had a famously loving marriage. They were devoted to each other for 43 years until his death. This wasn't a man who hated women or thought poorly of his wife, so this is just a lie again.
He said man has ultimately become superior to women, poetry, strength, voice, etc.
No, that's not what he meant when he said that, if you just read the rest of the quote.
Darwin believed in inbreeding. He married his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood. He wanted to have a superior stock. They produced 10 children. Mary died shortly after birth. Anne died at age 10. Robert, born retarded, died at 19 months. Henrietta had a serious nervous breakdown. Three of his six sons were so ill so often Charles thought they were semi-invalids. So much for your superior stock, Charlie.
Did he believe in superior stock? Let's find out. No need to wonder, just loaded up our question gun, let's go answer hunting. No, that's not true. That was a lie. In The Descent of Man, 1871, Darwin wrote, quote, with savages, the weak in body or mind are soon eliminated. With civilized men, on the other hand, do our utmost to check the process of elimination. Thus, the weak members of civilized societies propagate their kind. So he's describing Idiocracy, the movie. No one who has attended to the breeding of domestic animals will doubt that this must be highly injurious to the race of man. Hardly anyone is so ignorant as to allow his worst animals to breed. But, this is crucial, Darwin immediately rejected eugenics. He continued, but if we were intentionally to neglect the weak and helpless, it could only be for the contingent benefit, with an overwhelming present evil. Oh, that's fascinating. And he emphasized, nor could we check our sympathy, if so urged by hard reason, without deterioration in the noblest part of our nature. So, did Darwin believe in superior stock? It sounds like his beliefs were from the time period in which he lived, which means he probably did believe in racial ideology to some degree, but he believed that intentionally neglecting the weak and helpless is evil. It's an overwhelming present evil. We should be helping the helpless and the weak. So he had a moral compass that Kent Hovind is completely ignoring here, is the point. The hypocrisy is amazing. Yeah, tell me about it.
Evolution is a bad tree, has a bad root, brings forth evil fruit. Evolution is the foundation for immorality. It's the foundation for humanism, the foundation for racism. And now we're going to cover evolution is the foundation philosophy for Nazism.
No. Literally none of that. The entire fucking thing that he just laid down is a lie.
Communism and the New World Order.
Oh my God.